It's not something that happened far away and everybody suddenly got up and thought, hey, we're going to do all these various things. And I just wanted to start by mentioning the Paris Commune in 1871. And you'll know that it was a very short-lived commune, but it is very often, and quite rightly, put forward as the forerunner of the revolution in Russia in 1917. I think it was 10 weeks, it wasn't very long that the actual commune lasted. What it did do was show to the working class that it isn't any good being rebels only. You could say what you wanted to say about your government and about the ruling class, but you could destroy things that the ruling class tried to put in place. But unless you actually took over the instruments of government, in the Paris case, the government of the city of Paris, unless you took the state, you couldn't change the state. And of course, the ruling classes of Europe were absolutely terrified by what had happened. And so terrified were they that they killed some 20,000 people in May 1871. And they tried to silence the working classes on the impact of that commune. They tried to vilify the refugees. They tried to suggest that working people, that ordinary people had no part nor lot in working together, working against the state, working against the interests of the ruling class, because actually the ruling classes look after everyone's interests. We're all in it together, and we were all in it together supposedly in 1871. Now, many refugees from that commune came to Britain, and they had direct links, of course, with Karl Marx, who was living in London. And the early communists in those days, they made a particular point of annually celebrating, yes, celebrating, as well as commemorating that commune, and explaining to people, thousands of people at a time, what was the implication of that. And the implication of it was that another world is possible. And you'll know that Karl Marx wrote The Civil War in France about all of those things immediately, just a few days after that commune had been put down. And the ruling classes of Europe, including our own ruling class, tried to stop those celebrations. They used to celebrate every year at Highgate, actually on the anniversary of Marx's death in March. They used to come together with the refugees from Paris, and the ruling classes were terrified. The first year after Marx died, they wouldn't even let Eleanor Marx in to put flowers on the grave. 5,000 police in London came to stop people coming together in that cemetery and marking the commune and marking Karl Marx. And what happened with the revolution in October 1917 is that it proved a great victory, that the ruling class that the working class could not be stopped, that the working class could take the state, that they did take the state, and that they would transform it into a workers' state. and that that workers' state would be an internationalist state. And the evidence was there for all to see. And as our film so well showed us, the working people in Britain were not going to have our ruling class attack that workers' state. They mayn't have known the detail about it. You know, we hadn't got our social media, we weren't twittering from Petrograd or whatever. We did have national papers that reached the working class. We did have papers such as the one that started off as the Women's Dreadnought and became the Workers' Dreadnought. We did have the Daily Herald. The news used to take quite a long time to come through, but it was very, very different from the news that was in the mass media of the day. Because the mass media of the day told complete lies about what was happening in Russia, the new Soviet Union, that new workers' state. So workers knew that they shouldn't attack it. They also gained huge, huge confidence from that workers' state. And we are always told in the First World War that, you know, all the workers went with the government, everybody went with the government, they were warmongers, you know, they joined in the war effort. It was an effort for everybody, that First World War. It couldn't be a bigger lie. And it's persisted, hasn't it, down the generations. That's the sort of thing I was told in school in the 1960s. That everybody was together fighting Germany, whatever would have happened if Germany had won, and so on. But the working people knew that it wasn't in their interests. That the leaders of the working class went with the government, the trade unions, the union leaders, almost to a man, and they were men. The leaders of the Labour Party went with the government, almost to a person. But in the workers' committees, the film talked about the Clydeside Committee, the work of the workers' committees in the workplaces. They knew that not to oppose. They knew not to oppose that new workers' state. And when it came to a huge crisis in 1920, in August 1920, when there was a general strike threatened and councils of action, a central council of action was formed to organise the general strike to prevent war against the Soviet Union. When that happened, there was a call that went out for every Labour Party branch, for the trades councils, for all other bodies that could form a council of action in their localities to organise in their localities for a general strike against the war. And John Foster, one of our comrades, has written now, Councils of Action 1920 in the British Labour Movement's Defence of the Soviet Union. It's Manifesto Press, I only have my own copy here. This is the commercial. Please, please, to read it. Very short pamphlet, it details that. There were 300 councils across Britain, all set up to organise, and the ruling class was terrified. That was the same summer as the Communist Party was formed, and I think July the 31st, that year, July the 31st, August the 1st, the Communist Party was formed. Not only the Communist Party, but left and progressive people through the generations since have brought the values of that revolution, the values of October, into the labour movement. And just as with the Paris Commune, the ruling class in Britain, and I know in every other country, has done its level best to ensure that we do not understand what is possible. That what happened in the Soviet Union was some kind of an idyllic vision that went wrong. That we would always get defeated. That revolutionaries fall out amongst themselves and bring themselves down. That there is really no possibility of building the kind of world that the revolution in Russia prefigured. And it is our responsibility always, always, to make sure that the road to peace and socialism is built and is an open road, and that we go together along that road. The people who are in the various political parties in Britain, who are in the various campaigns, be they national or local campaigns, the trade union movement, the branches, the regional structures, nationally, that road and that understanding is always open. And that is one of the biggest questions of our time. I was in school not long ago, and I was actually asked the same question by a child who attended a meeting at Bridgewater Trades Council a couple of weeks ago. Now, the Labour Party is going to get into power. It has the manifesto for the many and for the few. So why is there a Communist Party? Isn't its job done? Why don't you, Liz? Why don't you go and join the Labour Party? And I said to that class, it was actually in Exeter College, I was talking to the politics students in Exeter College, and I said, you know, you couldn't be more wrong, because it takes us all together to work. It's not about being in opposition to the Labour Party. It's about the Labour Party and all the rest, left and progressive people building a movement. And if we all think that we all should go and join the Labour Party, then what will happen is we will move just one step forward. And it's a very important step, because we will have a different kind of government in Britain to the ones that we have had before. But it will deal only with the immediate. It will deal very well, and it's very important, it's a very big part of the jigsaw of the left and its needs. But it will reform capitalism. That is what it will do. It is a social democratic party. But what we have to do as a movement, build the movement, is to build towards a revolutionary change in society. And these 100th anniversary celebrations have reminded us of that. Not just to celebrate them, they have reminded us that it is our duty to do that, together. Now that doesn't mean we stand there and say, oh, I agree with you, that's great, you know, whatever tonight. It does mean that we talk with our brothers and sisters across the left and across the progressive movement, that we build that movement. But it does mean that there is something distinct about our party, because it is a revolutionary party. That is very, very important to us. It is a revolutionary party, and it does not believe that you can vote in a government and get towards socialism that way. Whoever thought that the capitalist state, the imperialist state, would let you? We really have a job on our hands, comrades, brothers and sisters, everywhere to do together. And I'm going to finish on something that, well, two things actually, that happened immediately after the revolution. We've already talked about there being a decree on peace. You heard Maxine Peake talk about that in the film. I don't know whether you knew, but it was issued by that people's government, that people's state, within 24 hours of that revolutionary takeover. Within 24 hours. And it wasn't just talking about bringing an end to the First World War. It was talking about the kind of peace where all peoples have their share of that peace. Where annexations are forbidden, where secret diplomacy is forbidden, and incidentally the revolutionaries in Russia soon exposed all the shenanigans that the British government had been getting up to in the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and the McMahon correspondence, and Balfour, and so on. All the things that they were up to for their land grabs and resource grabs and labour grabs and every other grab on the planet. But at the end of that decree and peace, those revolutionaries made an appeal to the working classes of the most advanced capitalist countries involved in the war, the belligerent countries. And of course, it was Britain, it was France, and it was Germany. And it said, look, great things have come from your country, Chartism, revolutions, the organisation of the working class in Germany, and it names them, names the contributions of the working class. But now it is your duty to tackle your imperialist government. That is the first duty of communists and of left and progressive people in any country. And we often get sidelined by what I would call charity solidarity. It's really worse over there. You're very lucky to be in Britain, and perhaps if you could have a collection. And I'm not knocking it as something, as an ingredient. But we do it as a displacement activity for challenging our government. Now, when we get a Labour government, we need to push that Labour government into being an internationalist government. We don't want to be in NATO. It's the alliance of imperialism, it's the root of conflict across the world. We don't want people exploited across the world through the multinationals, through the big banks, through the labour grab, through the land grab, through the resources grab. We don't want those things. And what we have to do when there is a Labour government in power is to get steps towards that understanding. And at the same time, to be going forward towards a revolutionary change in the government of Britain, and together with our sisters and brothers and our comrades, to do that throughout the world. It's something that we can do. When I was at Tolfadal, I was talking in a meeting about the revolution, and someone said, no one talks about communism anymore. How wrong they were. How absolutely wrong they were. And let's just end with the words of Lenin in the April thesis when he returned to Russia. I'm not going to read very much of it, but there is one particular thing that he said that we need to really, really bear in mind. And he said this: as long as we are in the minority, we carry on the work of criticising and exposing errors, and at the same time we preach the necessity of transferring the entire state power to the Soviets of workers' deputies, so that the people may overcome their mistakes by experiences. We don't slam into them. We explain, we expose, we work together, and we win the argument. And only that way can we build a movement that will win the revolution. Long live peace and socialism.